5 years ago, I was standing about 100 yards from Chernobyl nuclear reactor number 4. My Geiger counter, which measures radiation, was going berserk. The closer I got, the more frenetic it became and frantic I got. I was there covering the world's worst nuclear accident, the 25th anniversary of it. And as you can see by the look on my face, somewhat reluctantly so. But with good reason, because the covering over reactor number 4 that was hastily built almost 30 years ago now sits cracked and rusted and leaking radiation. So I just wanted to get my filming done and get out of there fast. But a few minutes after this picture was taken, I saw some smoke in the distance, and I'm thinking, you know, what could that be? A village? Could someone be living here? It just couldn't be possible, I didn't think. But, because after all, Chernobyl is one of the most toxic places on Earth. The soil, the water, the air are all contaminated, and the nuclear fire that burned for 11 days back in 1986 released 400 times as much radiation as the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. And reactor number 4 sits at the center of a tightly regulated exclusion zone, or dead zone. It's a 1,000 square mile nuclear police state, complete with border guards, draconian radiation rules, and as you can see, there's constant monitoring for contamination. The point being, no human being should be living anywhere near the dead zone, but they are. It turns out there's a community of some 100 people called self-settlers living inside the zone, and almost all of them are women. The men having died off earlier, in part due to overuse of alcohol, cigarettes, if not radiation. Now, hundreds of thousands of people were evacuated at the time of the accident, but not everybody accepted that fate. These are the last survivors of a group who defied authorities, and it would seem common sense, and returned to their ancestral homes inside the zone. As one woman put it to a soldier who was trying to evacuate her for a second time, "Shoot me and dig the grave, otherwise I'm going home." I mean, why would they return to such deadly land? Were they unaware of the risks or crazy enough to ignore them, or both? The thing is, they see their lives and the risks they run decidedly differently. Now, around Chernobyl, there are abandoned villages, bucolic, charming. Many were buried under at the time of the accident. All are totally contaminated. Others have 1 or 2 babushkas, or babas. That's the Russian and Ukrainian words for grandmother, who live in them. Other villages might have 6 or 7 women in them. So this is the strange demographic of the zone, isolated, alone, together. And when I made my way to a village, it was called Kupovate, I met Hannah Zavorotnya, the self-declared mayor of Kupovate village, population 8. And she told me when I asked her the obvious question, "Radiation doesn't scare me, starvation does." Now you have to remember, these are people who have survived the worst atrocities of the 20th century, Stalin's enforced famines of the 1930s, which killed millions of Ukrainians. In the 40s, the Nazis came through, raping, killing, and in fact, many of these women were shipped to Germany as forced labor. So when a couple decades into Soviet rule, Chernobyl happened, they were unwilling to flee in the face of an enemy that was invisible. So they returned to their villages and are told they're going to get sick and die soon. But 5 happy years, the thinking goes, is better than 10 stuck in a high-rise on the outskirts of Kiev, separated from their gardens, the graves of their mothers and fathers, their children. The whisper of stork wings on a spring afternoon. For them, environmental contamination may not be the worst sort of devastation. And this holds true for other species as well. Wolves, wild boar, lynx, they've all returned to the zone in force. The very real, very negative effects of radiation being trumped by the upside of a mass exodus of humans. The dead zone, it turns out, is full of life. Here's a clip from the film.
Хватит.
So as you can see, it's not all wildlife in the zone, or a different kind of wildlife. Now, I'm going to take another left turn here. There is a subculture of young Ukrainians who have taken to sneaking into the zone illegally. They're called Stalkers. They are going in to explore the radioactive ghost villages. They are imitating a video game called Stalker, which is set inside the zone. They are looking for, they're called the cemeteries. They are where the radioactive machinery was buried after the remediation in 1986. They're taking their dosimeters and looking for those burial grounds. Now, why do they do it? Youthful alienation, rebellion, yes, but also it's important to remember that their generation was defined by this tragedy, yet they do not know the villain at the center of it. They've never seen it, reactor number 4. It's responsible for what took the lives of their grandfathers in many cases, and certainly responsible, many people think, for the fatalism that's so prevalent in the region. For the women of the zone, it is not about thrill-seeking. In them, there's kind of a heroic resilience, a kind of plain-spoken pragmatism, particular to those who might start their day pulling water from a well at 5 a.m. and end it at midnight, beating a bucket with a stick to scare off wild boar that might mess with their potatoes. A little bit of moonshine, homemade vodka, their only company. And among them, there's a patina of simple defiance. They told us our legs would hurt, so what? I mean, what about their health? The benefits of hardy physical living, but in an environment made toxic by a complicated, little understood enemy, radiation, it's really hard to parse. I mean, health studies from the region are contradictory and controversial. The World Health Organization puts the eventual number of Chernobyl deaths at 4,000, but other organizations, such as Greenpeace, put that number in the tens of thousands. Now, everybody agrees that thyroid cancers are sky high and that Chernobyl evacuees suffer the trauma of relocated peoples everywhere, higher rates of alcoholism, unemployment, anxiety, and very importantly, disrupted social networks. Now, like many of you, I have moved maybe 15, 18 times in my life. Home is a transient concept. I have a deeper connection to my laptop than any bit of soil. So it's hard for us to understand, but home is the entire cosmos of the rural babushka, and connection to the land is palpable. And perhaps because these women were schooled under the Soviets and versed in the Russian poets, aphorisms about these ideas slip from their mouths all the time. If you leave, you die. Those who left are worse off now. They are dying of sadness. Motherland is motherland. I will never leave. Show you one more clip from my film, The Babushkas of Chernobyl, which really illustrates this idea.
Це не є зона лишення свободи. А в Києві я б вже, вмерла б давно, може, 5 разів, не раз. Там вихлопні гази більше, ніж може навіть тут. Тому що кожна машина вихлопне таблицю Менделєєва, а ви її вдихнете в свої легкі. Кушать. Ви хімію всяку разну кушаєте. Це не є здорово, це не є хорошо. Ну, зона відчуження. Тут життя не прекращається, однако все одно. Природа бере своє. І річка тече так само, і рибака живе так само. Нікуди не поїду, хай мене під пістолетом.
And here is the really surprising truth. There's evidence that the women who have returned to their homes and lived for the last 30 years off some of the most toxic land on earth have actually outlived their counterparts who accepted relocation. By some estimates, up to 10 years. I mean, how could this be? I mean, here's a theory. Could it be that those ties to home actually affect longevity? The power of motherland, so intransigent to that part of the world, seems almost palliative. By avoiding relocation trauma, which is devastating to anybody, but especially the elderly, they've actually stayed happier and thus healthier. It turns out home and community are forces that rival, even radiation. And for the Stalkers, who are the first generation disconnected from the ties to land and community, I think they sense that disconnect and are searching for something new. Now, radiation or not, the women of the zone are at the end of their lives. In the next decade, the zone's human residents will be gone, and the place will revert to a wild, radioactive place full only of animals, daring, flummoxed scientists, and perhaps seeking stalkers. But the spirit and existence of the babushkas, whose numbers have been halved in the 5 years I've known them, will leave us with powerful new ideas to think about and grapple with, about the relative nature of risk, about transformative connections to home, and about the magnificent tonic of personal agency and self-determination. Thank you.